Hey everyone, how are you doing? This lecture is for Monday, May 4th. Welcome to your last week of your senior year. The plan for this week is we're going to do Ed Puzzle lecture and assignments Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and we will take our social psychology test on Thursday. So those will be your last grades of the fourth quarter. Um, Remember, you need an 80 or better in this class in order to get the credit from LIU Post. Please be checking on Infinite Campus to see what kind of work you might still owe. I need to get your grades in by next Monday, I think by noon. So that is going to be May 11th. And I'd like to really get everything wrapped up by this Friday. So let's not let this get down to the wire. Please check Infinite Campus. I will be doing an audit within the next day or two of Infinite Campus to let you know if there is something that you think you handed in but you did not. I'm not looking to, take points off anybody's grades or hurt anybody. We need to finish strong and get this completed and, make sure we have the same grades for each student in the class. So that is the plan. I hope you guys are all doing well. I hope you spent some time outside this weekend. The weather was absolutely beautiful. The plan for Monday, we're going to talk about self-serving bias and compliance techniques. Tuesday, we will talk about stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination. And then Wednesday, we will finish with aggression versus altruism. All right. And that will wrap up our social psychology unit. So self-serving bias, we are all guilty of this. And I'm going to show a little video here. We are definitely all guilty of this. And you'll see some of the examples used here. And then we can kind of come back and discuss some more examples that we know. But this is something that is prevalent in our lives. And what a bias is typically some sort of impulsive snap judgment that we make, or an impulsive thought, a quick irrational thought that we might have in our brains. And it plays a basis throughout our lives, and they are unavoidable. But to learn about them and to know something more about them is to hopefully be more aware and potentially even kind of slow down and be able to control them a little bit more. Because bias, when things go wrong, either in our lives individually or as on a team or as a class or in society, bias normally is at the forefront of a lot of these problems when people are kind of making these snap judgments without really thinking about, really the way they feel or really the way that other people feel and how our actions affect one another. So let's check out this video.
The self-serving bias describes the tendency of people to attribute success to themselves and failure to outside factors. In other words, if it worked, it's because of me. If it didn't, it's because of someone or something else. It's a common type of cognitive bias that has been studied extensively in social psychology. For example, if a person passes her driving test on the first try, she says that it was because she studied hard and she is a good driver. But if she fails, she blames the examiner, the car, the weather, or anything but her bad driving skills. Studies show that the self-serving bias happens in many different situations of our daily lives, at school, at the workplace, in relationships, sports, and even when we decide what to shop. Researchers think that it helps protect our self-esteem and reduces hurtful emotions we can't control. Self-control, culture, it sounds innocent, but you could have done. Self-control, culture, and emotion all play a role, and we even use it to protect others when we say, "It wasn't your fault, there's nothing you could have done." It sounds innocent, but the self-serving bias can have a great impact on our life because we don't learn from our mistakes, and that we can do something for years without getting better at it. If the driving student admits that she failed because she didn't practice enough, she could ask people for help, study harder, and pass the test on the second try. After all, you can only influence your own actions, and not those of others or your environment. So here are some tips that can help you avoid the pitfalls of self-serving bias. Get started by observing yourself and notice when you're doing it. Then ask yourself, why are you doing it, and does it help you move forward? Try to imagine how your future looks if you use the self-serving bias a lot, and what happens if you accept your failures or look at things that help you succeed. try not to think about the causes of problems too much without moving forward and trying to solve them. When we dwell on the past, our mind looks for excuses, which starts the self-serving bias. Recognize when something is your own fault and learn to forgive yourself. Everybody makes mistakes, but only the people who understand when they did something wrong can learn and grow. This social innovation video was sponsored and created by Minute Videos.
Okay, so this example of the young person who goes for their road test and then fails it and blames everybody else but themselves. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of times that I have had a student who will miss a half a day of school because they're going for the road test and then come back to me the next day and tell me that they failed and how it's everybody else's fault, all the way from the instructor to the tester, to their parents, to the car, to the weather. And, I've had students fail multiple times who have every time made an excuse that it was somebody else but their own fault. And we do this in varying degrees. Listen, certain people are definitely doing this more than others. Certain people do this in certain circumstances and situations versus others, but we are all guilty of this. Your parents are guilty of this as well, right? Like when you do something wrong or you don't do well in a class or you get caught lying or whatever it might be, they don't blame themselves as parents. It's you. It's your characteristics that did this, not that they did anything wrong. Okay? So I think the most interesting point of that video was that when we adhere to this kind of bias, it stops us from learning from our mistakes, because if our mistakes are always somebody else's fault and we always take the emphasis off of us and put it onto somebody else, then we've never done anything wrong. And there really is nothing to learn because we've never made a mistake in the first place, which is obviously certainly not reality. Now, compliance techniques. So this has to do a lot with persuasion. How do we change people's thoughts, attitudes, and behaviors to get them to do what we want? All right. Now, this persuasion and compliance is in all aspects of life. The idea of selling yourself, selling your ideas, selling an idea of what you want somebody else to do. All right. Persuasion is everywhere if you think about it, right? You had to persuade St. Anthony's to let you in. You had to persuade your college. You had to sell yourself to your college that you're going to go to in order to admit you to the school. You're going to be doing that when you're looking for work or when you're going to graduate school. Even when you form relationships with either friends or romantic partners, it's the same idea. We're constantly asking people to consider us, think like us, buy something from us if you're in sales. Okay, so the act of compliance, persuasion, it's all about communication and different tactics that can be used in order to get people to comply. So let's go through a couple of those. So the foot in the door kind of approach here, proposed by Robert Cialdini, the tendency for people who have first agreed to a small request to comply later with a larger request. Okay, so foot in the door, right? You're inching your way in. Okay, so the foot in the door technique has been used in fundraising and to promote environmental awareness. So in the event of fundraising, you're going to ask for $1 or $5 before you ask for 500. You're kind of easing or gradually working up to what your main goal might be in getting that person to comply with your request. All right, so an example in the classroom, if I give out an answer on a quiz, what happens next? Okay, if I give out one answer, why can't I give out 2 answers or 3 answers or 5 answers? If I push a due date back a day, why can't I push it back 3 days, 5 days, a week? Okay, so we see this in various aspects of our life. It definitely is a tactic to be able to get somebody to do something more along the lines of what you want them to do as time moves on. So there was a study by Dickerson in 1992. So it's a field experiment where he asked university students to conserve water in the dormitory showers. So the researchers, they asked a group of students to sign a poster supporting shorter showers to save water. Then they asked students to do a survey asking them to think about their own water usage. And then they monitored students what their shower time actually was. And they realized that students who had signed the poster and had done the survey spent an average of 3.5 minutes less in the shower compared to the rest of the students in the dormitory who did not sign the poster and had not done the survey. So this is a foot in the door. You introduced the idea. When somebody is showering in their normal habits, they're not thinking about water conservation. But now you put a poster in front of them and put a survey in front of them that hints at the idea that water needs to be conserved, and then what are your behaviors regarding the preservation of water? That then can modify their behavior. So, because you made them conscious of it, you made them aware that there might be a problem. And it may not be for love of environment, okay, that you did this, but perhaps it's a conformity where you're being judged now based upon the water that you are being used. You didn't think that anybody was paying attention to it, and now they are. So there can be a lot of different motivations here within this, but this is sort of a gradual approach to getting a larger goal of you to comply to. Now, in cultural differences, we usually break this down here in social psych between individualistic or individualist and collectivist cultures. Now, America, the UK, are fiercely individualistic cultures. The Asian cultures, such as China or Japan, would be much more of a collectivistic culture. So, yes, we work in groups in America all the time, but the individual, the autonomy of the individual, the freedom, the liberty of each person has been like tantamount or paramount to the American experience, that you yourself can work hard, pick yourself up by the bootstraps, and become something. Okay. Whereas in an Asian culture, they tend to look at it more as on a society level, or at least on a city or community level, that where we put aside our individual desires for the goal of the group. Americans tend to think that when each person is doing their job up to their best ability, that benefits the whole. That's definitely true. Okay, collectivist societies see it a little bit differently. They both have their positives and their negatives. So in terms of the foot in the door, individualist cultures are more likely to comply with the second request than are people in collectivist cultures. Collectivist cultures are not as concerned with being consistent with previous behavior because they are less focused on their inner motivation, unlike people in individualist cultures. So the idea of, well, you don't pay attention to it to the second time, all right, versus I ask you for a little bit the first time, and then I ask you for more the second time. That is going to be more on the lines of the foot in the door compliance technique. We see that foot in the door work more, let's say, in a individualist society, whereas in a collectivist society, they're not thinking so much as what they themselves were doing or wanted. They are programmed more to think about the group. So the foot in the door is not going to have as big of a consistent effect on those cultures as opposed to the American culture. So the door in the face, this is the opposite. Large request is made knowing it will probably be refused so that the person will agree to a much smaller request. And the real objective is to get the person to agree to the small request, which is made to seem very reasonable because it is compared to such a large, seemingly unreasonable request. So if you see the little example there, can I borrow $100? No, I don't have that much. Can I borrow $10? Yeah, sure. Because in relation to $100, the $10 seems a lot more reasonable. And perhaps all along the person just wanted the $10 from you, but they kind of set you up by making that bigger request. Okay? So this is called anchoring bias. And there are a whole slew of cognitive biases that definitely play out in the social psychology realm. We have talked about a couple of them as we've gone through the course. But the anchoring bias means that you are basically anchoring them down with the idea of a request of $100. So then the $10 basically it relieves it for them. Okay, it kind of makes the bias go away. It alleviates the pressure of the larger request. And this is baked into sales tactics all the time. Think about the car buying business. Okay. I mean, you can potentially negotiate $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 off of a car. So when you go in and you see the sticker price of $25,000, okay, and then you show a little interest in the car, you take it for a test drive, you're spending time with the salesman. Eventually you get down to brass tacks and it's well, you know, what do you want to pay for this car? And you say, oh, I want to pay $22,000. And they say, okay, you just think that you got the deal of the century because in your mind, the car was $25,000. Now you're getting it for $22,000. Perhaps that still puts $2,000 in the pockets of the salesman and the car dealership. So there is price manipulation and price, kind of playing around with price based on psychological tactics. And listen, this stuff is studied by economists, by economic psychologists, social psychologists, salespeople. They know this stuff inside and out. They know pricing. They know their businesses. Okay. And You see this in all parts of advertising is here's the price. Oh, no, 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 we'll lower it. And that gets you to actually spring and buy the product because you were first thinking that it was going to be much more expensive. So the example of the door in the face, someone might ask you to give 5 hours of your time a week for the next year as a volunteer to a charity. After hearing this offer, you may think it is a huge request, after which you may be asked to, instead of committing to all this volunteering time, just donate a small amount of money. So compared to the time commitment, this request seems much more acceptable. So if I ask you to donate 5 hours of your time every week to charity, and then I say, oh, you know what? Just give $2 a week to the charity. I may have wanted that $2 all along. I set you up with the 5 hours, which I knew that you would kind of balk at. And now the $2 just seems like, oh, yeah, well, I don't want to spend the 5 hours, but I do want to help a charity. Let me give the $2. So lowballing, strategy to induce a person to agree to something by enticing the individual with a low cost and then add on to the original product. So we can go back to cars. When you see a commercial that says that you can drive this car for $199 a month, that sounds really, really good. So you go to the dealership. What you realize, though, when you get there is that if you want anything in that car, they are looking at the base model for $199 a month. It has cloth seats. It doesn't have upgraded radio. Now, I mean, I'm thinking back in the day, like when cars didn't have power windows, cars didn't have alloy wheels, cars didn't have, let's say, cassette or CD capabilities. Now, they do it with the features today on cars. I don't really know what the base car has, but you don't want it. Okay, you want one of the nicer models. And what they do is they bring you in at $199. So now you're looking at the new cars, you're talking to the salesman, you went for a drive. Now they start talking about all the different options. Well, if you buy the SE, you get this. That's the sports package. And you get a bigger tire and you get a better sound system. And then if you buy the XLE, then you get an upgraded navigation. And if you buy the XLE Platinum, it has a moonroof or leather seats or a third row or whatever it might be. More, all-wheel drive capability. So lowballing is you're showing that rock bottom price and you're showing the car, right? And you can't tell what options that car has in the advertisement. It's classic bait and switch, basically. They're baiting you into coming in, and then they're going to switch it because they know that most people are not going to buy the base model of cars. Most car manufacturers don't even build that many base models because they know that people want the options. So they get you in the door. It's kind of like, bait on the hook, right? They get you on the door, they set that bait, and then when they come in, they try to hook you on something bigger. Now, reciprocity. The social norm of reciprocity dictates that we treat other people the way they treat us. People are socialized into returning favors, and this powerful rule underpins compliance. So just the simple idea that it's this quid pro quo kind of situation. I do something for you, you do something for me. It's kind of part of the social contract, right? We're all doing things for each other, getting along with each other. No, the idea of karma, that what goes around comes around, and what I pay forward today, I get back tomorrow. All right, that does underpin compliance because we're more agreeable to help people and to do things in society if we know that we will receive that help back later in our lives or in the year, whatever the time frame might be. So, if you look at it the way, like my job is to teach, right? Guide knowledge, bring information, talk to kids like they're adults, engage them in their ideas, give them confidence and positivity, help them prepare for the future, talk about, the mistakes that have been made and how we can do better. All right. All of those things, like, you're not in it for the money as a teacher. You're in it for the intrinsic benefits of, being a help to other people. But we'd all be liars if we didn't think that down the line, this is going to somehow come back and repay us. So if you think about it that way, if we help our students become happy, productive members of society, okay, they go out, they go to college, they do well, they get good jobs. They buy things that helps improve the economy. They vote, which helps our political situation. They pay Social Security taxes. So when you're working and I'm older and I'm receiving Social Security benefits, I can sit there and say, well, I helped those kids get there and become successful, and now some of it is coming back to me. So we find this reciprocal nature in all things. All relationships have them. Okay, why would you want to be part of a relationship if you're not getting back out what you're putting in? Okay. And let us stop there. We'll do self-fulfilling prophecy, which leads us into prejudice, discrimination, stereotyping for Tuesday. Okay, I hope you guys are all well. Please keep paying attention to your Google Classrooms. Continue to engage in these Edpuzzle assignments. Email me with any questions or problems. Again, my apologies that this is the way you're spending your last your last week of senior year. Words can barely express how sad we all are about that. And remember that the school is doing everything they can to honor you guys. And just hang in there. Okay, things are going to get better. Things are already getting better, and we'll all get through this together. So thank you, and I will speak to you guys soon.